Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of The Snake Pit. I'm your host, Son of Bat, and tonight I'll be talking about The Rules of Attraction. Released in 2002, The Rules of Attraction is a dark comedy drama film written and directed by Roger Avery, based on the 1987 novel of the same name by Bret Easton Ellis. For those of you thinking that name sounds familiar, he is the author of books like Less Than Zero, American Psycho, Glamorama, Imperial Bedrooms, The Informers, and The Shards. All these books, varying degrees of crazy, depressing, nihilistic, fucked up, you name it. It's got a lot of fans. It's also got a lot of detractors with people saying things like, it's got a lot of unlikable characters, people you can't root for. It's very boring, very cynical. But that's the whole point with a lot of his work, So if you don't enjoy that, you're probably not going to enjoy this movie. I've heard some people, in the past few months when they've reviewed this movie, they call it like the American Psycho DLC, which I think is kind of disingenuous to this film. Yeah, it is sort of a prequel to American Psycho in some ways. The book definitely is, because it takes place 2 years before American Psycho. But I don't think, the two being tied together has to do anything with making this movie stand on its own. There's little to no mention of American Psycho aside from obviously one of the main characters' names, Sean Bateman. But other than that, this movie is its own thing. It's very different. American Psycho is a horror comedy. This is, like an anti-college comedy dramedy. And you'll see what I mean in a sec when I get more into it. But yeah, there's similar characters, and shit like that, but they're two different separate entities. But it is cool because the books do all overlap with each other. There is something called the Ellisverse, and out of the 8 books he's put out, 4 of them have been made into movies, with some characters being mentioned and shit just like in the books, which I think is pretty cool. But unfortunately, they've never actually gotten it down where like characters from previous movies have showed up into the next movie. They tried to do that with this one. They tried to do it with a future movie that never got made, which would have been the adaptation of Ellis's 4th book, Glamorama. And I'll get more on that later because that's a fucking crazy one. But yeah, Rules of Attraction essentially follows 3 main characters. Sean Bateman, who is of course the younger brother to Patrick Bateman. Patrick's a psychopath, Sean is a sociopath, so they're very similar but also very different. He is the drug dealer. The next character is Lauren Hind, who is the love interest to Sean. He's like pining after her the whole movie. She's the virgin, and most of the movie she's actually pining for her boyfriend Victor Johnson, also known as Victor Ward in Glamorama, who's off in Europe being a fucking degenerate. She eventually kind of falls for Sean a bit, but that blows up. And then you have Paul Denton, who is labeled as the bisexual, and he's actually the ex of Lauren, but he's pining after Sean the whole movie. So like I said, you have this love triangle of people who are very self-absorbed, not really good people, kind of just morally gray at best. Sean being the most morally gray and probably the worst. But yeah, everyone here is kind of just a spoiled brat. They're all fucked up, and because they're so self-absorbed and self-indulgent and looking for the next high or the next release, they can never truly be honest with themselves. Therefore, they can never be honest with the people they're trying to get into relationships with. So whenever they do try to get into a relationship, it blows up in their face like horribly. It's like literally this movie's like a giant tragedy that plays on loop. It's really fucked up. It's really cynical, nihilistic, depressing, but at the same time very fucking funny and very satirical. I said this is like the anti-college movie, and that was the intention of director Roger Avery. He wanted to make an anti-college movie, something to contend with like the sex films that were very popular in the late 90s, like American Pie and shit like that. And he succeeded. I mean, this movie is fucking hilarious. It definitely is a college movie, but it's not your typical college movie. It's got the satire and dark edge of Ellis, so you're in for a really depressed, depraved fucking ride. But, if you're into that shit as humor, then you're going to be right at home with this. If you don't like the other Ellis adaptions like Less Than Zero or American Psycho or The Informers, you're not going to fucking like this movie. If you don't like Ellis's books, you're not going to like this movie. But, if you're a fan of the books, you'll really like this movie because it is probably the closest adaptation to his novel. American Psycho is kind of close, but very different. There's a lot of shit omitted from that. Bret Easton Ellis has even come forward and said this is the closest accurate depiction of what happens in the book. However, though, there are some differences. I mean, like, the book takes place in, fall of 1985, whereas the movie takes place in about, 2000, 2001. But there's interesting nods to the movie being, the book originally taking place in the 80s, and you seeing that in this movie. I mean, most of the soundtrack of this movie is like 80s pop music, which is pretty cool. You got like Yazoo and like, fucking The Cure and shit like that. So, and I think George Michael, there's a scene with a George Michael song, but yeah, this movie definitely has the vibe of the 80s. It's just set in modern day 2000, 2001, which, it works. It's pretty cool. Again, doesn't take away. This movie is still really interesting. Now, essentially, the plot is very loose. Not as loose as the book, but it's pretty loose. You get 3 narrations from Sean, Lauren, and Paul. They're all kind of unreliable narrators, so you can't really tell who's telling the truth, especially when their stories kind of intersect with each other. You pick up on this more in the book, like with Sean and Paul, because with Paul's interpretation and narration in the chapters, you get the idea that him and Sean have hooked up multiple fucking times and that they're in a relationship. Whereas you read Sean's chapters that take place at the same time, there's literally no mention of it at all. The movie, kind of kept it ambiguous like the book, but it kind of veered more into the direction that Paul was fantasizing the relationship the whole time and it was one-sided. Whereas the book does a better job of, kind of making it like a bigger question mark of like who's telling the truth. Because again, they're both egotistical, unreliable narrators. If I were to really dive into the plot of this movie, it would get really complex and confusing because there's time jumps. It's a typical Roger Avary signature that goes back to Pulp Fiction. It works in this movie, but I'd be going back and forth consistently. Let's just say this whole movie goes over the semester of the 3 of them at college into this love triangle and how over the course of the semester, they all pretty much just left sad, depressed, and empty. A lot like how you'll feel after you read a fucking Ellis book, sad, depressed, and empty. But that's the thing. People who don't like it, I guess they don't really get it. It's all part of the postmodern hell, like vibe that this guy was writing off and shit in all of his books. I enjoy this shit. I don't think I could read multiple books of his back to back, but I've read a couple of them, over the years. They're all pretty interesting and stuff. And at the end of the day, it makes you feel something, like, what I mean? Which you can't say for a lot of movies coming out now. Like this movie, watched it a few days ago when my buddy came over, and actually one of my best friends, Drew, recommended that we should actually cover this on the channel. So you know what, I decided to. It's proven to be a pretty hard review. It's a little complex, but I'm glad I'm doing it because I feel like this is a movie more people should see. Go into it, if you want to go into it knowing it's an Ellis movie, that's good, but don't go into this movie thinking it's American Psycho DLC, because they are two, again, wildly different films. It is, again, interesting to see Sean Bateman be a fucking, clearly a Bateman, just a sociopathic like monster, but like, not a homicidal monster. He's more just preying on people's emotions, looking to get high, looking to fuck the next chick. Where he fucks up with Lauren is he ends up fucking Lauren's roommate. And then he says like, oh, like I fucked her, but I still love you. And like, it's just crazy the manipulation in games this guy plays. You can tell he's a Bateman. He has moments of psychopathy, like he owes this townie drug dealer like $3,000 and he keeps refusing to pay him. So he takes fucking Kevin from American Pie, funny enough, up to the guy's house to get the money and get more blow. And then a whole fight ensues where like they all almost die. Sean ends up stealing the fucking 8-ball that they needed to get, and he fucking just goes psychotic in the car. When you watch the movie, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And aside from it being confusing with all these like plots interlacing and time going back and forward, I also don't really want to spoil this movie because I feel like not a lot of people have really seen it. I mean, I'm sure it's got its fans. It is a cult film, but like I'm sure like the wider scope of people haven't seen this, and like it would be cool to jump into it like blind, because I read the book maybe like 10 years ago, so there was a couple things that kind of clicked when I watched the movie, but like I'd only recently seen this movie this summer and I was like blown away. I was like, yo, this is up there with American Psycho. This would be a good double feature. Less Than Zero, if you want to do a 3-picture feature, it would be really good too. The only one I haven't seen that I do own though is The Informers. Informers is different because that's more short stories, but again, you got overlapping stories. I think Sean Bateman shows up or is at least mentioned in The Informers. Timothy Price, who's Patrick Bateman's best friend in American Psycho, named Timothy Bryce in the movie, actually shows up as a teenager in The Informers. So I'm spinning my wheels here, but there's a lot of shit to go over in the whole expanded Ellisverse, and I think these movies are great. You can't really label them genre wise. You kind of got to put them all together because all these stories intersect into very interesting ways. Like Less Than Zero, even though the movie for that came out in 1987, there's a part where like these chicks are snorting like a bunch of lines of coke, and then one's nose starts bleeding, and she looks and like giggles and goes, "Oh, a little rust in the pipes." And there's literally a part in this movie where Lauren and her roommate are doing a bunch of blow, and the roommate's nose starts bleeding, and she goes, "Haha, a little rust in the pipes." So it's like funny that there's callbacks, not only characters showing up and cross-lacing, but there's like, you know, lines of dialogue and shit. It's really fucking cool. It's really trippy. Again, you're just witnessing the lives of, you know, empty people just trying to act normal, kind of, you know, and it just not working at all. The backdrop of college and self-indulgence, drugs everywhere, and constant hookups. These people are just constantly self-destructing, and that's why they'll never be able to successfully feel. There's a really good scene where like Lauren tells off Sean at the end of the movie after she's had enough of his shit, and he's like, "I just want to know you," and she says, "Nobody ever really knows anybody." And then Sean fucks off, starts drinking some Jack Daniels in the snow, and there's this great scene where a snowflake falls on his eye and it forms a singular tear because the guy can't cry because he truly doesn't care. And then Paul comes up out of the snow and pretty much, you know, confesses his love and intrigue with Sean. And then Sean responds with him like nobody knows anybody, and fucking obliterates his heart right there. It's just, everyone gets fucked off in this movie. You know, like I was saying, Lauren's spending most of the movie pining for her boyfriend Victor, who's in Europe, being a total degenerate. But meanwhile, she's like blowing her fucking English teacher and trying to hook up with Sean. So like morally dubious people all around. And Victor, actually, we do get his narration. I'll get more into that when I break into the differences of the books and when I talk about Glitterati, but his part was probably one of the best parts in the movie, for my opinion, because of how it just, the film changes, and it's just really trippy. Like, the whole movie's kind of a trip. Even, you know, the first movie that was released, Less Than Zero, is a trip too, but it's not as accurate to the book. It's actually probably one of the most inaccurate ones to the book. But yeah, I'm going off. I mean, I love the guy's books. They're very depressing, very funny, very fucked up. Most of the movie adaptions I've seen have been pretty fucking good. Yeah, as you can tell, I highly regard this movie. If I had to rate it on a scale from 10, I'd probably give it a 10. Like, this movie is great. The thing that kind of fucks me off, though, is the DVD cover, which you're going to see in the picture. It does not sell the movie properly at all. It looks like a romantic comedy, like, you know, a chick flick, which it fucking isn't. This movie should have had a different cover, which it did. The original poster was like green with a bunch of like stuffed animals in different fucking positions, which I think would have been a better poster, but like studios were hesitant to market it that way. And again, studios marketing this movie wrong is, I think, what really fucked it up, because well, there's two things, and one of them I'll get into, but one of them was the mismarketing of this movie, them trying to sell it as like a raunchy teen sex comedy in the vein of American Pie, I think, is what really hurt this movie. Because apparently when they screened it, a bunch of like the teen test audience that saw it, they wigged out, they didn't like it, and they were apparently yelling at the screen, calling it a fag film, which, I mean, yeah, there's gay shit that happens in this movie, but it's part of the story. I don't think it's like a big deal. You know, I think most normal people wouldn't think it's a big deal. So it's crazy that like these fucking kids who basically let their insecurities show pretty much help derail this movie is pretty fucked up. Because, and also the fact that the studio marketed it wrong. They didn't know what they were fucking selling, and that really hurt it too. It's just fucking stupid, and I think it kind of hurt the possibility of getting more films in what we call the Ellisverse, because Roger Avery said if this movie was successful, he was planning on adapting Ellis's fourth book, which was called Glamorama, and that never happened because this movie wasn't a huge success, which I think is fucking bullshit. But anyway, yeah. That's why you never trust a studio, really, man. You never trust the money handlers with this, because they're not trying to like sell the art or the truth. They just want to get their money back, and they thought the best way to get their money back was to market it like fucking American Pie. Really dumb. But yeah, no, this movie is really good, though. I highly recommend it. It's very disturbing. It's very funny. It's a total... It would seem like a stretch to do a review of this on the channel, but in actuality, it's right at home with everything else here on the channel. The thing that fucks me off, though, other than the cover of this being really messed up, is the only other way to get this on DVD is it's like a double pack, right? And it comes with this and Kids from Larry Clark, which I'm not knocking Kids. That's another fucked up crazy movie that we are going to definitely review here at the channel, but it's weird that it got put on a double pack with that when it should have been put on a double pack with American Psycho, even though they're totally different genre movies. They both fit together, the same kind of humor, the same fucking author, for fuck's sakes. But yeah, so if you ever get this, you get the DVD that you're seeing right here, or you're going to be getting this weird 2-pack that comes with kids. This is also the R-rated version. Apparently the only uncut version is the European cut, but realistically I think it's about 23 seconds of footage that's missing. It's the footage from the rape that happens at the beginning of the movie, the footage of the suicide, and I believe like some shots of porn that's on a magazine and on a TV and a couple scenes. That's about it. So it's really nothing that got cut. But there are differences from the book. Ellis has gone on record, like I mentioned, saying that this is the closest adaptation to any of his books on film. But having said that, there are some, big differences. I don't think they take away from the story at all, but, it's kind of like, because I remember I read the book like 10 or so years ago. So when I was watching the movie, it was like coming back to me, but there were certain things that I felt like, oh wait, am I seeing a cut version of this movie? Because where's this and where's that? And what I'm talking about is specifically this. So spoiler alert, if you haven't read the 1987 novel, The Rules of Attraction, or if you haven't seen the movie, this is your warning. Basically, the main differences are the book takes place in 1985, whereas the movie takes place around 2000 and 2001, which, side note, so a lot of the characters' stories intersect with each other at either drug runs or parties, and these parties are called end of the world parties, or dressed to get fucked, or dressed to get laid parties, or undressed to get laid parties, or whatever the fuck. And so that's where a lot of these characters meet with each other. Now, apparently, when they were filming this movie at the end of the world party, which takes place at the beginning and end of the movie, those scenes were filmed on September 11th, 2001. So you had the end of the world party being filmed on the day 9/11 happened, which is a pretty fucked up, creepy parallel, but in an Ellis kind of way, in my opinion, is a little funny, in a fucked up kind of way. But another major difference is in the book, Sean and Lauren hook up and she even gets pregnant. Both characters agree that they don't want kids after going to New York and seeing a friend that had kids also, so Lauren gets an abortion. And this plot line obviously never makes it into the movie. Sean doesn't even hook up with Lauren in this movie. He blows it by fucking her roommate, and she walks in on it. So like they never end up hooking up. And another weird thing is in the book, it's mentioned that like when Lauren was a freshman, she was raped by 2 townies when she was passed out drunk at one of these parties. Now the movie begins and ends with the ending, obviously, kind of like Pulp Fiction, but the ending of this movie or story or beginning or whatever pretty much has Lauren getting raped by the townie, because the movie ends and it's confusing. Like I said, the movie begins and ends with our 3 protagonists at this end of the world party all fucked off at each other and going in different directions. Sean goes to fuck some chick, fucking Paul goes to fuck this guy who's like in the closet, and Lauren goes, and because she's just caught Sean fucking her roommate, she goes to find another guy to bang, because I guess fuck Victor. And she goes with this film student, she passes out drunk, and she wakes up getting raped by a townie, and that's how the movie kicks off. It's really fucking nasty. But yeah, so there's that minor difference right there, which, I mean, again, it doesn't really change anything. The other thing that I touched on earlier is the relationship between Sean and Paul is very ambiguous in the book. You can't really tell what's what. You kind of get one of 2 scenarios. Either the relationship happened and Sean's blacking it out because in the book it's in the 80s and he doesn't want to admit that he's like bi, because the shame that carries, so he's mentally blocking it out. Or there's also the possibility that Paul is fabricating the whole thing in his like sexual fantasies in his mind and shit. Again, the movie leans more into the latter, it being all in Paul's head. Again, slight change, it doesn't make a huge thing. But like Ellis's first novel, Less Than Zero, for the book of Rules of Attraction, there's more of a loose structure than what we get in the movie. I mean, the movie has a pretty loose structure, but the book is even more so. It's got a wider scope involving more characters, and in some cases whole chapter narrations from what would become side characters in the film version. So like an example of this would be Bertrand, which is like Sean's French roommate, and his whole part in the novel is actually in French. And he is also a character that shows up in Glamorama, but in the movie he's only a side character. I believe the plot line of Sean being a drug dealer, there's more interactions between him and Rupert, the drug dealer, which, by the way, all the scenes with Rupert, fucking crazy, bro. Like, that's where the violence of this movie kicks in, and it is fucking wild, those scenes. Another thing is Judy, the roommate. I think she has more of a narration in the book, but I can't really remember. And also there's Victor Johnson, Victor Ward, but they did manage to put Victor's segment into the movie toward the end into like a 5-minute segment, which is pretty trippy. And I'll get more into that later, and you'll see why, because that has to do with Glitterati and Glamorama. But yeah, like Victor also, again, main character Glamorama and Glitterati. And it's pretty crazy what could have been if this movie was a success. Some connections to the previous Ellis books are Less Than Zero. The connection with Less Than Zero and Rules of Attraction is obviously Camden College, the fictional liberal arts college in New Hampshire. Many main characters and side characters either attend this school, have in the past, present, or they will be mentioning it in passing. Clay, actually, the main protagonist from Less Than Zero, attends this school, and in the novel for Rules of Attraction, he actually narrates one of the chapters. And it's funny because in Less Than Zero, Clay seems to want nothing more than to leave LA and return to Camden, whereas in Rules, it's the reverse, and he wants nothing more than to leave Camden and return to LA. So again, he's another complicated character who shows up again in Imperial Bedrooms, and he's really fucked up in both the book of Less Than Zero and Imperial Bedrooms. In the movie for Less Than Zero, he's played by Andrew McCarthy, and of course, because it was an 80s movie, they couldn't have a morally gray protagonist. They had to have like a very much like hero protagonist, if you want to call it that. So he's not as fucked up as he is in the book. And actually, Roger Avery planned on getting Andrew McCarthy and Jamie Gertz, who played fucking both Clay and Blair in Less Than Zero, to show up as kind of a cameo scene in Rules of Attraction. But that never came to be. I guess it would have just added too much to this long-running story, which I think is a shame, because it would have been cool to kind of expand the other movies other than American Psycho into this. Speaking of American Psycho, there's obvious connections there. The obvious one being Patrick and Sean Bateman, the two brothers, Patrick the psychopath, Sean the sociopath. However, viewers who have never seen American Psycho or caught Rules of Attraction without reading the book may have missed this, because they only say his last name, Sean's last name, I think a couple times in the movie, and there's no scenes with Patrick, and I think one time Sean says the name Patrick in passing to Paul, but again, there's no direct connection to American Psycho, at least not on the final version of the film. Like with Clay from Less Than Zero in the novel for Rules of Attraction, there's a chapter narrated by Patrick Bateman. However, this was before the creation of the novel in 1991, so there's no indication that he's a serial killer yet, just a Wall Street yuppie douchebag. And in 1991, when the novel of American Psycho came out, there's a chapter narrated by Sean Bateman where he still uses his signature phrase rock and roll, much to Patrick's annoyance. But like, I think the funniest thing, because I definitely remember this from American Psycho, the chapter that's narrated by Sean, it takes place at a restaurant that Patrick couldn't get reservations to. It might be Dorsia, so it just adds fuel to this fire, and it just like, it makes Patrick hate his brother Sean even more, because he doesn't like him. He thinks he's an underachieving slacker piece of shit, but the fact that he can get a reservation at a restaurant he can't just sends him up the fucking wall, which I think is absolutely hilarious. Another character who shows up in American Psycho from Rules of Attraction is Sean's possible lover, Paul Denton, who, if I remember correctly, is actually friends with Paul Owen, who in the movie of American Psycho is Paul Avery. Fucking confusing, I know, right? And originally, director Roger Avery intended to have Christian Bale reprise his role for a short cameo in Rules of Attraction, playing Patrick Bateman, but he outright refused, and why exactly, I don't know. But they tried and he said no, like straight up was like, fuck that shit. So then Roger Avery tried to convince author Bret Easton Ellis to play Patrick Bateman, and then he refused, saying it was a ridiculous idea and way too gimmicky. So they later settled on actor Casper Van Dien, and they actually filmed 2 scenes with him as Patrick Bateman. One is where he's on the phone with Sean, like Sean calls him trying to get more money so he can pay off the drug debt, and basically Patrick's just calling him a piece of shit the whole time. It's pretty fucking funny. And then the other scene is, quote, Patrick in his office wearing leopard underwear with a severed head of a woman on his desk. These scenes obviously don't make it into the final film, and no one's actually seen the second scene. It's only been mentioned by the director, but the first scene has been leaked on YouTube. I highly recommend you check that out. It's a very interesting take on Patrick Bateman, and I think Casper Van Dien did a pretty good job, but I get why they cut it. Maybe they wanted the movie to stand on its own, and maybe it just wasn't the same without having, Christian Bale play him. But funny enough, if you read Glamorama, there's a party Victor Ward holds And there's a cameo where Patrick Bateman shows up and he's got weird red stains on the lapel of his Armani suit. And then shortly after he runs into Patrick Bateman, he runs into Christian Bale at the same party. So there's some more of that meta fucking craziness that Ellis is known for. But yeah, the scene with Sean and Patrick arguing, you can find that on YouTube. It's pretty cool. Again, I'm sure there's more I'm missing, but again, I haven't read a lot of these books since high school, so my memory's a little spotty. But this takes us into the final piece of the puzzle, which is Glamorama, and more specifically Glitterati. So I was mentioning that in Rules of Attraction, the movie, and in the book, there's a narration from Lauren's boyfriend, Victor Johnson, also known as Victor Ward in Glamorama. And the whole time of the book, he's pretty much in Europe, and he's just going from city to city in all the capitals, doing drugs and fucking women and getting into fucking crazy adventures. Now, what they did, because when you watch this movie, the film quality changes from like, film to digital, and it's like almost like all camcorders and shit. And this whole, it's like a 4-minute segment at hyperspeed of Victor Ward trekking across Europe, doing drugs and fucking chicks. There's a couple Easter eggs to Glamorama, like bombs and shit, which I'll get more into when I talk about that. But essentially, they filmed this wasn't just a 4-minute segment. This was about 77 hours of footage they got, because by the time they were filming this, like, I guess the movie ran out of like its budget. So Roger Avery, the producer, and Kip Perude, the guy plays Victor in Rules of Attraction, they went to Europe and they trekked the cities that Victor goes to in Rules, and he basically stayed in character and improvised the whole thing and was just doing a bunch of drugs and fucking a bunch of chicks and shit. And then they spliced it down into 4 minutes and put it in the movie to have his narration. Then later on, the 77 hours of footage were compiled into an actual feature-length movie, which was to serve as a bridge film. Now, I was saying that Roger Avery said if Rules of Attraction was successful, he was going to do an adaptation of Glamorama. But between the two, he was going to do a bridge film called Glitterati. Now, this would have been the footage of Kip Perude going around in character as Victor Ward doing all this debauchery shit, and it would have been a full-length movie. It's never been released to the public due to legality concerns. I think, there were people who didn't sign, contracts or those fucking sheets of paper that say you can be in the movie or have your face showed, like license agreement or whatever. So there's that, and there's like a bunch of music shit. Also, Bret Easton Ellis said it's like explicit as fuck, because dude was in character and he basically just did it fucking, I can't think of the word. He basically just engulfed himself into the role, and he was Victor across Europe. And there's some weird shit with that. Like, apparently while he was doing this, he ran into a model who was actually at the time reading Glamorama, so she knew exactly what he was doing, and she was basically obsessed with what was going on, following the crew around, trying to keep up with the filming schedule and shit. And essentially, the plot of Glamorama is, if you've read American Psycho or seen it, that whole thing is a takedown on yuppie 80s fucking Wall Street culture. Glamorama is a takedown on 90s celebrity culture and the fashion industry. And it's kind of like Zoolander in the sense that these people use models to carry out terrorist acts and assassinations because they're so dumb, and they all have fucking handlers all the time, so all they do is take orders. And essentially that's how Glamorama plays out. Victor's like the main character of this whole fucking craziness. And actually, when Zoolander came out, Bret Easton Ellis did sue Ben Stiller for basically stealing the story. And I think it's a shame because, Zoolander, oh sure, funny fucking movie, whatever, but I think if we got Glamorama, that would have been a pretty crazy fucking movie in the vein of American Psycho, in terms of it just being violent and cynical as fuck, because they are very, very similar in a lot of ways. Again, one's taking down 80s culture in a very violent way, and the other's taking down 90s culture in a very schizophrenic, vile, nasty way. So yeah, it's really a shame that we never got Glitterati and we never got Glamorama, because if you watch the footage of Victor in Europe, it's crazy. I mean, I understand without the media release forms and shit why they couldn't release it, but it would be interesting, and it's like one of those movies a lot of people talk about that they wish they could see. I mean, I think it's only been shown a couple times. Roger Avery will show it at film screenings with other directors like Steven Soderbergh or David Fincher and shit. Other directors will watch it with each other. But the one time that the movie was ever actually played to the public, it was for a private art group in France, and they watched it in that theater that got illegally set up in the Paris catacombs, which I think would be a fucked up place to watch that movie. it's crazy. There's a lot of fucking Easter eggs in these Ellis movies. There's a lot of, reoccurring characters, a lot of the same themes of vapid emptiness. The main overarching theme, I think, of Rules of Attraction, there's a few that I walked away with. One of them is, obviously being self-absorbed, and like how, self-absorption and self-destruction can only create nothing but misery. And there's also like, this idea that you are the main character in your own story, but you also aren't. And that's the vibe this movie gives off. Like, it is a very cold, cynical, sad, empty movie, but at the same time, because Ellis wrote it, is a fucking funny, twisted movie. And yeah, it's a shame more people don't know about this, because this is actually a really fucking good movie. I haven't even gotten into the specs here, but yeah, of course, The Rules of Attraction, directed by Roger Avery, screenplay by Roger Avery, based on The Rules of Attraction by Bret Easton Ellis, produced by Greg Shapiro, starring James Vanderbeek, obviously as Sean Bateman, which, by the way, he was really fucking good in this movie. Like, the mannerisms, the behavior, you could tell he was a Bateman watching this. Sharon Sossamon, who plays Lauren. Kip Perude, who plays, of course, Victor. Jessica Biel, who plays Judy. Ian Somerhalder, who plays Paul. Clifton Collins Jr., who plays the drug dealer Rupert. And by the way, he's fucking Caesar in GTA, and also, I think, Caesar in 187. Awesome fucking movie. Thomas Ian Nicholas, who's actually, funny enough, one of the kids from American Pie. And I remember when me and my buddy Drew were watching this movie, the second we saw him and his little story arc with like him having to constantly get coke to fuck his girlfriend and shit, we kept saying to ourselves, I'm like, so this is what Kevin got up to in the years between American Pie 1 and 2, and why he came back in 2 such a depressed, wrecked piece of shit. And we were dying about that, man. Like, shouts out Drew. It's actually fucking hilarious. This movie was crazy, and the cast really brought it together. Actually, they don't mention it here, but Jay Baruchel's in this movie, and there's a really funny scene where, like, I guess they were supposed to, like, there was a couple scenes in this movie where it was really going to show, like, how in high school and college movies there's like clique groups, like, there was going to be the jock group, the slut group and shit, and there was a group that Paul's character was in, and Ian Somerhalder called it the fag table, and essentially it was all the bi and gay guys at the table. And I think you see a couple scenes with these dudes, and like one of them is Jay Baruchel. And one night when Paul's getting ready for his perceived or self-perceived date with Sean, he fucking has his friends come in, and they're like, oh my god, so and so he took wine coolers and Sudafed and he overdosed. So they basically have to drive Jay Baruchel over to a fucking hospital, and he's like, eyes rolling back like and shit, choking on his tongue, and they drag him to the hospital, and the doctor just looks at him and he's like, he's dead. He is fucking dead. Your friend is dead. And he's like, not. He's just lying there, and like all the gay guys are like, we'll sue you for malpractice. What do you mean he's dead? And he's like, your friend should have just said no, he's dead. And it's just like so surreal and fucked up. But like, yeah, I know he's in that movie too, so it's funny seeing a young Jay Baruchel. Also Swoozie Kurtz and Faye Dunaway. And Faye Dunaway, she was pretty wild. There's like a pair of moms in this movie. One of them is Paul's mom, and I guess Paul's friend with benefits from like childhood, this guy named Richard, who goes by Dick. Again, funny fucking scene. So basically the two of them were like, fucking around singing like George Michael, and then they go downstairs to meet the two moms for drinks, and fucking Dick Richard is like all fucked up. He's kind of acting like, Tyler Durden a little bit. I've seen a lot of people comment that he kind of acts like Tyler Durden and shit, but the whole interaction with them is funny because you have this like very like intoxicated, hedonistic gay guy just basically trying to give his mom a heart attack at the table, saying that like he's taking gangbang 101 and like freebasing tutorials and shit like that, and he's like smoking at the table and getting like shit faced and just being an ass. It was like really fucking funny, and these two moms are like popping Valiums trying to calm the fuck down, and they're wigging out and shit. Like, dude, this movie is filled with some sleazy, crazy, fucked up people, but like everyone in this movie is really interesting, really tragic to a degree, and really fucking funny. I can't stress that enough. A really weird comedy movie. This movie did not do good when it came out. I mean, it fucking was made on a budget of $4 million with a box office return of 11.8. And of course, because this movie wasn't a success, we can tell this movie wasn't a success because we never got Glitterati and we never got fucking Glamorama. Huge fucking shame. But yeah, no, this movie should have got way more love back in the day because it is actually really fucking good. Cinematography by Robert Brinkman, edited by Shannon Rudder, music by Tom and Dandy, production companies Kingsgate Films, Kingsgate Films, Roger Avery Film Production GmbH, distributed by Lionsgate Films in the United States and Concord Filmwerken in Germany. I hopefully didn't say that wrong. Released on October 11, 2002 in the United States and May 1st, 2003 in Germany, with a running time of 110 minutes. So 110 minutes is the run for the R-rated cut. I believe there's an unrated cut, but realistically it doesn't make a huge difference. The R-rated cut's completely fine. The only thing that I wonder actually if this is on this special edition, but basically, so here in like North America, we got two versions of this on DVD. We got the one we're looking at right now in the thumbnail that looks like some fucking chick flick, like does not set the tone for the movie at all. Horrible poster. They actually refer to it as the Saved by the Bell poster. And originally Roger Avery's idea was, and you can search this up, the poster was like a bunch of like stuffed animals in different fucking positions, which I think would have made more sense than what we have right here, because this just looks horrible. Like, you show this to someone and try to tell them all the shit I've told you about this, they're gonna look at it and be like, what the fuck is this chick flick shit, you know what I mean? Or if they're fucking deeply repressed in the closet, they might just yell at you and call it a fag film, who fucking knows. But yeah, this cover really does not sell the movie, alongside with them trying to sell it as an American Pie type movie. It does not help at all. So there's this DVD, which is the R-rated cut, and then there's the other version you can get in North America, which is on a split with another movie. And it's really fucking weird because it's this, and I think the double feature is Kids by Larry Clark, which I don't understand. I mean, they're both fucked up drama movies, but like, I don't know, they're two wildly different movies in my opinion, you know, like there's similar themes and shit, but they're just different, totally different. I would have made more sense to have this on a double feature DVD with American Psycho. They're both Lionsgate movies, they're both Bret Easton Ellis movies. It just would have made more fucking sense. But yeah, so that's how you get it in North America. But I believe in the UK, or specifically France, the UK did this by accident, but in France there's the unrated cut, and I believe the unrated cut, the only difference is like 23 seconds of footage. Like, one scene of porn is different. You know, it's less explicit in the R-rated version, and it's obviously more explicit in the NC-17 unrated, whatever you want to call it, version. The scene of the chick, Sean's secret admirer, spoiler, when she kills herself, it's more of an extended scene of her pulling the razor up her wrist. And I believe the rape scene with Lauren at the beginning and end of the movie is longer. But again, these are all things that don't really change it, in my opinion. You know, you saw my last video for Dawn of the Dead. I was like screaming to the hilltops about how when it comes to like fucked up movies, horror movies, comedies, you want the unrated cut because it tends to show more and it's more of a complete movie. Best example I can give is a Judd Apatow movie. You watch, let's say, the rated version of the 40-Year-Old Virgin, compare it to the unrated version, the movie feels significantly longer and like a lot of the better shit is gone. This one, it's like literally 23 seconds. It's almost like a horror movie level of cuts, and it doesn't really make too much of a difference. So unless you have a region free player or a Blu-ray player, get the unrated cut. The only other thing too I would imagine is maybe the deleted scene with Patrick Bateman. Like, I mean, the one that's on YouTube of him bitching out Sean on the phone might be on the Blu-ray. I think there's different commentary tracks, because on this DVD we're looking at here, there's two commentary tracks that make no fucking sense. One of them is like, I think Ron Jeremy, and then the other one is Carrot Top. I don't fucking, apparently Roger Avery said the Carrot Top interview was supposed to be like an in-joke for people to get like a meta type joke, but I don't know. I haven't watched that. There's a making of featurette, which is pretty interesting. I haven't really dove into a making of featurette on a DVD in a long time. This is the first one in a while that I did, and I forgot how cool those were. I used to do that a lot of time. That's why, you know, you do get special editions of movies, but I was surprised that that was on this. Shame there was no deleted scenes, but it is what it is. Again, it's on YouTube, and maybe one day a full cut will come out with those scenes in the movie, and maybe even Glitterati will come out. I've heard rumors that apparently it's supposed to come out in 2025 for a public screening, but I have no idea how that's going to work because, again, hella explicit, quote the author, and also legal fucking, you know, questions, says the director. So who knows? But yeah, again, like I said at the beginning of this video, though, this movie does not need to be directly tied to American Psycho for it to stand on its own and be considered a good film. This movie was fucked up. It was awesome. You can tell 100% it was an Ellis movie based off the dialogue and the narrations. and it just works, you know what I mean? Even without the direct correlation tied to American Psycho that all these YouTube film bros have been trying to make. Oh, American Psycho DLC. No. This is just part of the Ellisverse. And I mean, as soon as actually this summer I was kind of on an Ellis kick. The only movie I had owned, like I had a few of his books for a while, like Glamorama, Less Than Zero, American Psycho, and Lunar Park. But the only movie I had for the longest time was American Psycho, and it was in my horror section. Then one day in the summer, my coworker sold me his copy of Less Than Zero, and I watched it, and I was like, you know, even though Ellis hates this movie or has kind of eased up on it now, I really liked it. The soundtrack was awesome. Should save this for a review of that. But I remember, like, you know, I watched that and I was like, okay, there's got to be other, you know, movies out there. And then that's when I found Rules of Attraction and The Informers. And just by a stroke of luck, when I went to the video store next door, I fucking look and I find Rules of Attraction buried deep in the R section for a couple bucks. Bought it, came back the next day, found The Informers in the eye. So this review has opened the door for the Ellisverse. So those of you in the comments watching, thank my buddy Drew, because in the next coming months, obviously between the zombie movies and shit, I'm going to be covering more of the Bret Easton Ellis stuff, hopefully Less Than Zero, American Psycho, and The Informers. And yeah, we're just going to see how those work. But the thing is like, Less Than Zero and Rules of Attraction were both so good that it made me have to take American Psycho out of the horror section, and now it's sitting with the normal movies and what I call the Ellis section, where all 4 movies have been chronologically ordered by release, and it looks pretty fucking cool. I think it fits more there than it does in the horror, although it is kind of weird looking at the fucking psychological horror movies now and only seeing American Psycho 2, because that movie is dog shit. Those of you who've seen it know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, this was a fun review. This is a funny one. I know I spent a lot of time talking about other Ellis books, other, you know, sequel property, whatever the fuck, but really you kind of have to get the whole idea of Rules of Attraction and how all these movies work, because a lot of these characters are very similar. They have very similar mindsets, although the stories take place in different like cities, like, you know, Camden, New York, and fucking LA. They're very similar, cynical, nihilistic people. The stories are always depraved and interesting, and I think that's the thing about us is, like, as humans, is we cling to really fucked up shit. And these movies are, I don't know, like, in my opinion, I think they're well written. I think Rules of Attraction, from what I remember in the book, was very well written. I actually got to find a copy of that to buy soon. This movie, entertaining as fuck. It was really, really something great. I can't not praise it enough. Highly recommend it. You know, 10 out of 10, really good. Pairs well with American Psycho, pairs well with fucking Less Than Zero. Yet to make a, you know, a total claim on The Informers, but critics hate it. I'm probably gonna like it because that seems to be the theme with these movies and these books. So if you guys like this episode, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. It was a long one, but I hope it was worth it. Yeah, so we'll see you in the next one. I think it might be a zombie movie or another Ellis, but to be continued. Enjoy. Peace.